to start off by introducing our two great panelists. I'll start with Matt. Matt is the president of the Burning Glass Institute. He's dedicated his career to unlocking new avenues for mobility, opportunity, and equity through skills. He was the founder of Lightcast, which he sold 2 years ago to KKR. And Matt and his team created the field of real-time labor market data, a breakthrough innovation that transformed the way that policymakers, researchers, employees, educational institutions, and workers understand, plan for, and connect with the world of work. Matt led the Burning Glass to become the leading authority in the global market for talent, harnessing advanced AI and natural language processing to render data that provided unprecedented granularity on the changing landscape of work and opportunities. Matt worked in McKinsey, Capital One. He's also the founder of Mainline Classical Academy, and he writes widely on the job market and is frequently consulted by public officials and the global media. And then Denis Jacquet. Denis has been an entrepreneur for as long as he can remember. He founded his first company at 26 years old, and one of the first e-learning companies in France he founded in the 2000s. He became an activist entrepreneur, creating the first think tank on the impact of platforms and new digital-based business models on society and the environment and jobs. And Denis also launched a huge platform in Monaco called Day One, with a focus on action and outcome. He then founded what became the largest entrepreneurship association, growing the platform from 20 people to 6,000 people in just 5 years. And he has now just launched Topcreed, a B2B company, which is described as the Netflix of the best conferences in the world. Denis has also written 3 books, which met with wide audiences in France, receiving the prestigious Hugo Prize in France for his first book, and for his second book, the Asian equivalent of the Nobel Prize, for his work on jobs, automation, and AI. So I'd like to welcome you both, and we're looking forward to having this discussion.
Thank you, Lara.
And so we're here to discuss the topic that is on many of our minds, which is AI and the impact of AI on our humanity and on jobs and on our shared future. And I don't need to tell all of us we're living in complicated times, and it's not just climate change, geopolitical change, social change, and then on top of that we have AI. Last week, I think probably you all know because of traffic, if not for any other reason, was Hunger Week and Climate Week and CGI Week. And there were thousands of events around New York City, of which I attended maybe 20 of them. And what was amazing was a lot of the conversation was on AI, but it was more about the ethical and the unintended consequences of AI, and not much of it was actually focused on the impact of jobs, but maybe that's coming next. And then today I did a quick headline search, and just today, here are some of the headlines. ChatGPT can now process images and speak. Spotify's AI-led podcast translates their content while keeping their voices. Getty Images launches its own AI image generator. Amazon is investing up to $4 billion in Anthropic, and that was just today. And so in this world where things are changing and evolving so exponentially, it's hard for any of us to keep up, let alone business people have to figure out how they're going to grow their businesses and what impact that is going to have on the job market. I was actually talking to the head of Anglo America, which is the big mining company in South Africa this week. And he is now in the process of going into 2 countries to mine the 8 different minerals we now need for our new addiction to our EVs and electric cars and solar panels. And what's amazing is most of that is going to be automated. So he's going to be going into these places all over Africa and mining with automated robots and AI. And so then you ask, what are those communities actually going to be doing? How are they going to make money? And how are they going to actually survive? And so I think a lot of things have to be rethought. And we're here to unpack some of that today. So I'm going to start with my first question. And I'm going to ask Matt. While the internet was developed at CERN, as we know, by Vint Cerf, who's prioritized keeping it open and chose not to monetize it at the time or sell it to a company like Microsoft, its evolution has mixed outcomes, especially considering the impact of social media on all of us and our children's lives. And given this context, Matt, do you believe AI has the potential to remain open and benefit the wider population? Or could it become a tool controlled by a few, reinforcing social hierarchies and with the dominant group on one side and the rest of the world on the other?
we're at a point right now which is entirely fraught with, I think, really kind of seismic implications. Here's how I would think about this, right? So we are not going to see necessarily the same kinds of splits that have existed in society just get reinforced. I think in a lot of ways, generative AI in particular resets the playing field geopolitically. It resets the playing field of capitalism. It resets the playing field of social dynamics. But that doesn't mean that those will remain open and we are now moving into a silent bliss. Reset is both opportunity and risk. And so I think we are very possibly going to wind up with, and if not very likely, with similar kinds of dynamics with different sets of players. It's worth unpacking each of those stages: geopolitical, capitalist, and social, and thinking about the implications on each of those. So first of all, from a geopolitical perspective, right now it's not hard to trace the progress of industrialization over the past century, and to see where the winners and losers have shaken out. The global north versus the global south, and the returns to scale associated with capital. Now, generative AI has very different dynamics. The returns to scale are less around capital itself than, number one, in terms of data, and number two, in terms of the know-how of how to deal with data. So does that reset the geopolitical landscape? I think it does. It means that countries like the United States or France, who have been contending with high labor costs, low productivity, have a chance to open things back up. On the other hand, we see the opportunity for a lot of countries that have been at the margins to assert themselves and to really lean into the kind of specialty, the specialization and expertise that will differentiate them, which will happen, I think, too early to tell. Same thing from a corporate perspective. The Magnificent Seven, which seem to be dominating the headlines today, including all the headlines, Lara, you were just offering from just today, those aren't necessarily going to be the companies that manage generative AI. We've seen just by, perhaps by a billionaire's folly, we've seen what's happened to a company like Twitter, which I think for a lot of people just dominated our communications, and all of a sudden in the space of 6 to 12 months is fast on its way to becoming irrelevant. So we know that those kinds of changes can happen very quickly. But that said, when we go back to this question of who owns the data, who can mine these new sources of data, and who can develop the technologies and capabilities, those sorts of increasing returns to scale are very much present.
Do we fear there's going to be more of a consolidation, however? Because if it's who owns the data, then it could end up being 3 companies, or there could be a complete bifurcation where walls are put around different companies and it becomes even more fragmented, and we push more and more into sort of our little filter bubbles of AI.
I'm not actually sure that we will see the same kind of oligopoly that we've seen in the tech landscape today. Here's why. Here's why this might possibly be different. I'd like to use the example, you were talking before about your colleague at Anglo-American and about mining. I'm going to talk about a different kind of mineral extraction, which is petrochemical, fracking. Now, I want to put aside for a second all of the environmental implications, just for the purposes of this analogy of fracking. But fracking is a useful analogy from a data perspective. You see, those that shale oil, those tar sands, they were always there. But what happened is that over the last 20, 30 years, we started to develop technology for for being able to extract those deposits that were always lying present, but you just couldn't affordably take them out of the ground. There is a dramatic abundance of data that exists. Right now, those have tended to be monopolized by a few companies, because only a few companies have had the scale to be able to invest in extracting and tapping the value of those data repositories. So one of the things you may possibly see is that, for example, companies will be able to much more affordably look at all the data inside their organizations, which you would have needed a huge data science team to exploit in the past. Now they can do so themselves. So, I think the real question is going to be whether you have the same dynamics of who controls the data and the same advantages to controlling the data versus controlling the technology.
So, Denis and Matt, well, let me ask this question, but could you unpack the distinction between robotization, automation, and artificial intelligence? Because they're all sort of connected in a certain way, but they all have implications on each other.
So I want to unpack this in two ways. One is about, because I think underlying this question is a really important one, how in some ways is artificial intelligence different from the kind of automation that has long characterized the industrial economy, as long as we know it. So automation is nothing new. AI feels different. And so I think there's two questions here. One, is it different? Or is it just more of the same, packaged differently? And two, what can we learn from past waves of automation that can inform how we move forward at this moment? So at one level, the biggest difference about artificial intelligence versus automation is that it affects those of us in this room. Automation has historically been one of those sorts of things that affect people who work with their hands, and in kind of polite society, groups like these, we don't need to really worry about that because we have university degrees to support our progress. AI does feel different because of the nature of what is being automated. So what's being automated is that which we have historically associated with being human. The ability to write, the ability to exert human judgment, the ability to analyze. And so those get to the very foundations of what it means to be human. And so even though the mechanism is actually quite familiar, the impact is very similar. I said that there's some past examples that I think can give us some clarity with how to move forward. I'm going to compare two occupations that have both been disrupted in a certain way or have been impacted by automation. Very similar kinds of automation, very similar skill sets of the people working in these two jobs, and yet had entirely different outcomes. One of those is bank tellers. The other is airport customer service workers. So bank tellers, of course, were disrupted by ATM machines starting in the early 1980s. More recently, we see kiosks and now phone apps for checking in. When was the last time you actually had to interact with someone at an airport other than just say thank you to the person who scanned your board? Here's the difference, though, between those two roles. There are actually more bank tellers today than there were before there were ATM machines. And there are many fewer airport customer service workers. What's the difference? So bank tellers, when ATM machines came on the scene, in both cases, right, a lot of the task was automated. In both cases, the economics of the role changed. So it's not that I pay bank tellers any less than I did. I might pay them more. I'm not sure. Certainly, in real dollars, we expect it's at least the same. But the amount of bank teller I need per transaction is a lot less. Same thing with airport customer service workers. But bank branches, a big part of unit economics is the cost of bank so when the cost of bank tellers went down, I could open up a bank branch in the back of a supermarket. You know, most of us in this room are old enough to remember when you were coming up and the banks were truly made of marble with regard to the door. It was the social stamp or something like that. Right today, they literally can have one branch manager, one teller, and that's it. So it enabled the industry to scale. No one's going to fly another flight into an airport because they need one gate agent instead of two. So it didn't have the same kind of impact. The reason why I think that's really important right now is that some of the jobs that will be most impacted by artificial intelligence will actually see demand increase. And so the question is, what's left in those jobs? And how do we make sure that what is left is what's most valuable and what's most important?
So in the pivot, in the evolving landscape of AI integration, are businesses adequately poised for this imminent change? And how do you think this is going to differ between large-scale companies and small-scale companies, Denis? And what is the impact? How are they going to make that pivot?
I don't know. No, the thing, I'm going to start speaking. Please pretend, but I've got the same perfect accent as they are, and so you don't listen to any difference. So maybe just to come back to a few things that Matt just said. So you said, Lara, that you heard a lot of things about AI last week during these different conferences, and you didn't hear anything about, not so many things about AI and jobs. And the thing that I'm not hearing a lot is a conversation about AI and purpose. So we could find 1 million reasons even tonight about why we should use AI. Health, security, whatever. But we never speak globally about what would be the purpose. What kind of progress are we expecting from the usage of AI? And the thing is that, you know, with AI compared to so many different technologies, there is no going back. And I would say the global spirit, specifically in the Silicon Valley, is that let's do it and fix it later. But there's no fixing later, because you're not going back. So I think there's a lot of good reasons, but there's I don't see any real big thinking about what's the purpose of AI, why should we do it, is it so important that we need, because I'm an entrepreneur, so I can understand productivity, profits, doing things more rapidly, more efficiently. But at the end of the day, is it progress? It's a change, but is it progress? And change is not progress. It's two very different things. So that would be the first stuff. And for me, it's, you know, I was thinking about the lab rats. And when you think about this, it's a kind of competition between scientists, startupper. Every one of them wants to do something great with a lot of impact. And at the end of the day, you're still waiting for the impact and the greatness. But the thing is, lab rats, when you think about rats, they are really smart. And you provide them something to do, and they do it quite perfectly and even better every day. But if you would ask the rats why they are doing it, they wouldn't be able to answer. And so the thing is that I would like them to have an answer to that. And on the consolidation, of course, it's about data, because what Matt said is very important. The data is here. It's not so much about the different other criteria, but the data. And of course, if you're China or India and you have roughly 1.5 billion people, you are just using a much more volume of data than France or Switzerland or Liechtenstein. So of course you have a great advantage that you cannot, that's the way, we are 68 million or something, there's almost 400 million, 1.5, so there's a natural advantage of being in a big country when you need a big set of data to everything. But at this stage, I don't know about tomorrow, but at this stage, if you think about NVIDIA, we are doing what, 80% of the chips that we are using in the world, American. Most of the social networks, American and Chinese. TikTok, unfortunately, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, about to suicide myself every day, TikTok, China. So it's at this stage, most of the largest company processing data are Chinese or American. The rest is non-existing. So, and when you think about Europe, the first thing they did, I was commenting this stuff on TV in France in June, said, okay, we just issued a new regulations. So if there was an Olympic game for regulation, Europe would be the first. That would be the only way where we are the first in something. But first one, regulating. So the regulation, what's about regulation? When you regulate according to the winners, because you adapt to them the regulation to the winning side. So you're already a slave to them, because you just build your regulation based on the guy who are controlling the whole system. And the second thing, it's a defensive stuff, and we need an aggressive stuff. So if we want to have a Europe of AI, we need to invest massively on AI, and it's not happening. So it means that tomorrow, whatever happens, maybe not the same companies, maybe it will be spread out a little bit more between people, because everyone could be using AI, but at the end of the day, definitely the US and China will be driving the world. I don't know how we can do otherwise. And not Africa, unfortunately, not South America, unfortunately. That's the way it will be going. And when you think about what's going on the geopolitical side, which is the BRICS now are doubled their size. So on one side, you have the biggest companies in the world and the biggest investment on AI, China and the US. And at the same time, all the natural resources are coming from Saudi Arabia, all these countries that are now working together. They doubled their size during summer to oppose themselves to the Western world. And now they want to get out of the dollar for international transactions. So it means that there's something happening here that will be fueled in part by AI, that will be changing the world. But unfortunately, not for Africa, not for South America, not for Europe.
I think what you're talking about also is just this fear of reinforcing the algorithm biases, because whatever you put in, you take out of these systems. And so if it's just these big data sets coming from one or two countries in the world, well, the algorithms are going to be skewed, and you talked about impact. And really all our big global challenges are truly global, and if we're going to use AI to solve those challenges, I would think that we need to have inputs that come from the whole world to ensure the diversity of the solutions that we're putting out into the world.
And that's why they are spying us to get our data.
So, in the context of AI's rapid evolution, what specific roles do you think will disappear, and what roles are reinvented, and who's in charge of how we think about that?
Do you want to start, or? Oh, no, go ahead. I need some break because I spoke a lot.
I'll tell you what. Can I just first, I want to, I think Denis brought up some pretty important points before we talk about when it goes away, what could be born. I'm wondering, when we think about this question of whether market dominance goes to the US and China, because those are the countries that seem to own the technology platforms, that seem to be wresting control of data. I wonder if we should reframe how we think about it in terms of who the winners and losers may become over time. And I wonder whether the question is not who's investing in technology, but who's investing in people. The reality is, and this goes, maybe it actually didn't mean to answer your question correctly, Lara, but I will anyway. So because I think this does have to do with how this impacts jobs, which go away and which get born, and more broadly, how each job that everyone has gets changed. And I think what we're going to find is this, that these changes will be broad. Again, every job will, we've been doing a lot of work, we're at the Learning Lessons too, looking at each task in every job, understanding what's the kind of nature of the impact. And what we're finding is that it actually is extending something that we've seen for many years in the market, which is that all jobs are generative AI is going to accelerate that tremendously. So even, I said before that some jobs there will be greater demand, even as they become significantly impacted by AI. That's true, and at some level it's basic economics, right? You know, it's what economists like to call price elasticity of demand. When something gets cheaper, you buy more of it. But here's the thing. A job may grow in demand and at the same time require a very different set of skills. A job may decline in demand, but the people who are left and the people who win in that field actually will likewise need very different skills. What we know is that the US in particular, but I think this is a problem of shared across the industrial world, has actually really struggled to invest in education. We've failed to create effective infrastructures. We've failed to create effective infrastructures for how people launch into their careers, but even more importantly, for how people transform in their careers over time. That doesn't have to be the case. France has invested in a lifelong learning infrastructure, which is actually a global model. Singapore has done likewise, but there are too few countries that have made those kinds of investments. So ultimately, great, somebody's invested in a technology platform, but if you don't have a workforce that has acquired the skills to be able to work with, to develop, to stay ahead of automated systems and artificial intelligence, then you're not necessarily going to wind up being a winner. Do I see lots of jobs going away? Yes, but not whole occupations. I think you're more likely, yes, you'll see some new occupations. AI psychologists, that was a really cool one in a packet. Prompt engineers and all the ones we're thinking about today. Dozens of others we're not thinking about today. The key is being able to track them quickly. The key is being able to develop the talent for them, not much less quickly. And that means having a very responsive education and training system. We don't have that today.
Yeah, and I guess to your point, I was talking to somebody the other day that's created an AI that can detect heart failure. So if we looked at it that way, maybe AI just allows us to be better physicians, and maybe it allows us to be more human. Ultimately, what we would hope from technology is that instead of making us less human, it actually allows us to connect more and interact more, and allows us to be better at what we do in the perfect world where AI ultimately does go.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe that's the most depressive part of my speech, but so we will have a drink after. But I don't think there will be a nightmare of losing millions of jobs in the next 5 coming years. I would be more worried. It's a question, it's not an affirmation, because say anything about anything over 5 years is just stupidity. So it's just a question that I'm asking. But the first impact could be on the paycheck. So think about you hiring someone, smart guy, and he or she is collecting data, processing data, using them to make decisions. That's roughly what the human brain is doing on a daily basis for professional or personal purposes. Every studies available on the market show that everything is automated. How do you say automatizable, or is it
Automated?
Automated. Can be automated from 42 to 92%. So as an entrepreneur, tomorrow I get this guy coming in my company, and let's say roughly and brutally that 70% of what he's or she doing is done by an artificial intelligence. Should I pay him or her the same price that I was paying when he was doing the full stuff? And so I think it's a big question, because
It makes her or him more efficient. So maybe you should pay them more.
yeah. So it's a very good question. So because ultimately we said, okay, now we'll need, thanks to AI, we'll be able to develop so many things, and we'll need more coders. And a few weeks or months after, we say, oh, by the way, we don't need more coders because AI will be able to code itself. So, and at some point it will be becoming so sophisticated that we will be able to code not only very basic stuff, but very sophisticated stuff. So, my question is, there are so many jobs where at least there will be an impact on the paycheck. Think about, in France, we have a wonderful system where you don't pay for your health, which is a big change compared to the US where you can die if you can pay, roughly. And if you think about that, a radiologist at this time could be making what, 30, 40, 50,000 euros in his pocket net every month. Suddenly, VI is doing his job better than him or she. Why the social security should pay for him this amount? We will say, oh, VI is doing your job, I will be paying 50% of that. So my first thing is that I think there will be at some point an impact on the paycheck. The second impact will be less about, it won't be killing jobs, but we will hire less people. So if you're working, I don't know, KPMG, Deloitte, or all these big fours, at this stage, they are trying to reduce the number of auditors that they need. Because really doing a survey on any financial statements, VI is doing it thoroughly in a few seconds. It takes 4 to 6 months to a human auditor to do it. And they just do a survey on a few things. They don't need them anymore. So the first thing is that when they will need less people. So it's not that it's killing jobs that are existing now, but they will hire less people. But the good point about this is that there's less people to take the jobs. Because there are so many, as you know, the Western civilization is growing old, is aging. There's no demography anywhere. A little bit in India, in Africa, but it's slowing down. So we don't have enough young people to take the jobs of older people that are leaving. So we will hire less people, but it's good news because we have less people to hire. So at some point there will be a balance between them, but for a very limited part of time. Yeah.
And the US, it's flattening. But if you look at places like Nigeria, it's hockey sticks. So the youth that tomorrow are in Africa, and they are still going to need jobs.
Yeah.
So it will be a huge stabilizing factor.
Yeah, of course. So I think that for at least the foreseeable future, the 5 coming years, look at what's going on in Europe and even in the US. The employment rate is very low, but there's no growth. And you say, how can you don't have any growth? And at the same time, the demand is so huge on the labor market. But at least in Europe, it's that because aging people are leaving their jobs and we don't have enough young people to replace them. So the impact on this on the paycheck, the scarcity in jobs for tomorrow, and what I call the ripple effect. So in a few words, let's say that the largest press agency in China, they don't have journalists. Not one, no, 10%, yeah. And they're equivalent in the Western world, they have 70% of journalists. So it means that at some point, most of the Asian countries have been investing massively into automation and now AI because they don't have any demography, they don't have any young people. Japan, I think that 40% of the population is over 65. In China, they don't do kids, so they are sinners. So they do it for the fun of it, but not to create new kids. Let's put it that way. And so it means that you don't have kids, you don't have young people to take over the jobs. And they are basically creating companies that don't need human, not because they want to kill jobs, but just because they don't have people to take them. So they are really advanced on that. So at some point you're a Chinese company, you're a press agency, and you go to Italy, France, US, and you say, well, my profit margin is 80%. My competitors, 20%, 50%. The ripple effect is that if you want to survive as a European American company, you will have to invest massively into technology and lay off 60% of your journalists to be able to compete. So it's not that AI will kill jobs, but the rippling effect is that you will have to kill jobs to survive. So that's the kind of depressing things, at least questions that we can ask. I don't know if it will be happening, but that's the way. And as for small and medium businesses, you know, most of the small and medium businesses have been 1,000 years away from the digital transformation so far in Europe, but in the US as well. In France, 72% of the small and medium businesses are under 250 employees, and 90% of these 70% are under 20 employees. They don't have the resources, the skills, the people to embark into any kind of AA-based transformation. So I would be, as an entrepreneur, I would be quite pessimistic about the capacity of small and medium businesses to adapt.
Here's my fear as we talk about customization and customer service. I don't know about all of you, but my experience with robots and you know, when a robot is basically your customer service agent has been very, very negative. And so as we move into the world of AI, where your customer service agent becomes also a AI bot, and you're trying to get through to a human being, and there's no way to get through that human being. I feel like AI should be enhancing our humanity and making our lives more human and better, and it feels like when you have those kind of experiences, it is a very dehumanizing experience. So as we think about the transition, how do we bring the humanity back into those sort of moments if we're cutting our workforce and we're cutting our back end and we're servicing the humans?
So I think this goes back to the question of skills and capabilities, and why I'd say that training is, education and training is such an important key to not just who wins and loses at a geopolitical level, not just in terms of which companies and the workforces that you keep up, and whether small business can or not, but ultimately to how we define what it is to be human and how we bring value to human endeavor.
Do you think that needs to be regulated? Do you think somebody needs to say, your company, you can't just do AI and bots? At the end of the day, I should be able to get hold of a human who can answer my question. Does that need to be regulated? Or do you
I think that's
we
extremely hard to regulate because it means defining things, and I think, Denis, you talked about this before, it means actually locking into existing business models, right? It means saying, hey, look, the right way to deal with customer queries is by being able to have somebody in a call center, a contact center, who's able to take the query. I don't know that that's actually, if you were to rethink the whole thing, is that how I would want people necessarily to serve? No. But the key thing, though, is this. When I look at any given job, you were talking before about all the things that sort of go away and that you anticipate, hey, look, 70% of somebody's role might be going away. The question is, which 70%? Is it the 70% which is the most valuable or the least valuable? And by the way, it's not going to be a consistent answer from job to job. There's going to be a lot of jobs where it's the most valuable 70%, and where people are going to be driven, people who are working in those roles are going to become cogs in the machine. And so frankly, as frustrating as it is to talk to a computer and not be able to speak to an agent, right? We've all gone through those kinds of things, and I think you said, look, as frustrating as that is, what's maybe even worse is when you're speaking to somebody and they have absolutely no authority, absolutely no dignity in their work, and are just being asked to read from a script. That's dehumanizing to them, and it's equally humanizing to me as a customer. And so if instead we say, okay, in a given role, how do we change the equation to make human endeavor more valuable? One of the, Denis asked the question before about AI and purpose, or to what purpose are we even undertaking this very perilous endeavor? And part of the reason is that, and then you just articulated where, and we see the productivity is stalled. So in the meantime, we have expensive lifestyle choices. We have expensive global imperatives like addressing the transition to a net zero economy. Those are things that require new productivity. But here's the thing. Productivity is a ratio. It's the ratio of the value of the output of labor to the cost of the input. When we think about it, we tend to think about kind of the Frederick Taylor management science, people with clipboards going around and stopwatches and measuring things. Whenever we have a conversation about productivity, we're talking about the denominator, how to make things cost, how to make labor cost less. Use less of it, use cheaper labor. The real question is, how do we make labor worth more? How do we focus on the numerator? You make people's efforts worth more when people are more skilled, not less. When that person in the contact center has the capacity and has the authority to address my questions as opposed to shrinking their scope of responsibility, making them more and more an cognitive machine. We do that when we invest in people.
Can we turn to the recruitment process? So I have two kids, they're 22 years old, and one of them was going through the recruitment process recently. And the first leg of his recruitment was a service called HireView, which basically is an AI service that will have you submit a video and will eliminate you or not immediately based on the algorithm. How do we feel about where recruitment's going in this new world, and algorithm biases, who they're going to be optimized for, and ultimately how are we going to make it a fair, humanized recruitment process in a world that is becoming so automated with AI?
It's a good one too, but I was listening to what you said about humanity, and I remember something, it was, I don't know, maybe a documentary, or it was about the usage of robots in Asian countries compared to the rest of the world. And basically because most of these people are animists, so they value as much a chair, a lamp, a dog or whatever than human people. They said, because we give the same value to anyone as long as it brings something, they didn't see any problem in talking to robots, and specifically old people that most of the time are being lonely, and suddenly they had someone to talk with. And I don't know if you wrote this book, it was AI, US, China and the Superpowers by Kay Foley 4 or 5 years ago. And the end of the book was mainly about how technology could drive a more caring society, where we would have to take care of an aging population, and we need these technologies, these robots, whatever interactions that we need, because most of these people are alone. So I think that, yes, at some point, this technology will have the power, at least, and the ability to have this feel of having somebody with you. And I remember that, I don't know what it was, this huge hit episode in France 10 years ago or something, where so many people died from the heat wave. And we discovered that these people, they never talked to anyone because they were alone. So yeah, certainly it could bring a kind of additional care to the global system where people are more and more lonely, not only more and more poor, but also more and more lonely, so it can bring something. And I mean, for the hiring process, as for speaking to a chatbot. So a few weeks ago, I called somebody, a friend of mine, and I think it was Bank of America. I said, I'm trying to speak to someone, but 1, 2, 3, 4, nobody's answering me. And someone, oh, thank you for calling us. And I was getting mad about to break my phone, to break the wall, to break everything. So I called her and said, what should I do? They say, there's a trick in the system, say representative, representative, representative 3 times, and it unlocked the stuff overpass the communication process, and then you will get someone. Ah, thank you. And so we need someone. So, and exactly like Matt said a little bit earlier, a lot of companies that have been investing massively into automation, ultimately they reinforced and hired more people on the customer side. So they lost people on one side, but they hired more on the other side. And for the hiring process, I think it's something, of course, when you have, I don't know, 1,000 applications for a single job, you need some help, because otherwise you are paying people that are reading resumes that most of the time are full of scrap or bullshit because they just say what they never did before. So, oh yeah, I did a great job no, okay, you have been fired, nobody loved you, so you quit your job and you have been fired. So it makes some sense to do that, but at the end, there's at least a little bit of gut feeling, and most of the recruiters, they say, okay, there's 2 perfect candidates and 1 outsider. And suddenly the CEO has to make a decision and follow his intuition and its guts, and I think this part of the job will remain. But industrialize the rest should be okay.
In the process of algorithms, maybe the outlier is possibly the best for the job, to be eliminated before we even get to the CEO. Yeah.
But they have to work on the bias that they can be biased, so yeah.
And so a lot of it comes down to, are we using AI to replicate what we already are doing today? To look at existing patterns and just say, okay, how do we replicate them more efficiently? Where are we using AI to open new possibilities? Most of hiring today is structured around exclusion. Just definitionally, right? I have a big pile of candidates. At this point, I just received hundreds of CVs because one of the things that the internet has done is made it really easy to apply to lots of jobs. And as an employer, I need to find a way to go through them. And so, okay, great, we're just going to filter. And the real question is this, how do we actually rethink that model? So inherently where we put the filters is what we as hiring managers are used to. It's part of why we see so much continued dependence on a lot of roles on university degrees, even in roles where they don't make any sense, where the university degree doesn't represent anything other than some sort of risk management mechanism for the manager. And so the question is, can we change this from an exclusion-based set of technologies to inclusion-based technologies? What does that mean? That sounds really nice, right? But what would an inclusive hiring algorithm do? Instead of looking at, okay, what have we done before, and how do I then try to narrow the field down? As Denis was pointing out, in most fields right now, we're actually talent short. How do you use AI to do a deep, robust analysis of what are the skills and credentials that, we'll have more skills than credentials, what are the skills and capabilities that are needed to do a role, and where else can I find them? Where else do those exist inside a talent pool? That's an example of how actually AI could potentially allow us to find talent that's remaining hidden in plain sight today.
And I was thinking about this first competition between, let's call it an AI and a chess, one of the world's best chess champion. And so you remember he was losing and losing because he was using patterns and different strategies that he had already been using before. At some point he said, I don't know what he said really, but this is shit. And he said, I'm doing something wild. And suddenly the machine was lost and unable to understand the pattern, the logic in it, and the guys did it. But the machine learned that at some point they could do something which is not based on a pattern to win the game. So I think we can do the same, because we have been really mesmerized a few months ago because one of an unfinished classical song has been finished by an AI. Sincerely, there's nothing really impressive in that stuff. They listen at the pattern, say, oh, okay, the 2 third of the song was this way, so I can do the last third exactly the same way. Maybe Mozart or Chopin or do I think the final very original, but it seems logical to have been done that way. But now the good thing is that you can ask the AI, don't replicate patterns, surprise me. And so in the hiring process, it finds somebody different. So the good thing is that you can ask the AI not only to duplicate patterns, but to bring something fresh. And that's where the power of AI will be. And that's where we need that, because otherwise there won't be any more diversity than we have today.
So I want to just go back to the ethical questions. As big and small businesses start to integrate AI, what do we think are going to be the big ethical concerns that we should be looking out for?
Ethical. You know, there's globally, again, I'm also very sorry because I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm optimistic, but at some point you have to be deep into reality. I think that there's a lot of things that are not going well. My main concern is the shrinking of the middle class, because you know the middle class is the backbone of every society. So when you don't have a middle class, you become an emerging country, or you are an emerging country. And in the last 20 years, a large part of this middle class has been going down, and a very limited part of it has been going up. And a little bit more every day, there's nothing in the middle, which has not only societal implication, but also political. Because it means that at some point you don't have anyone to vote for the center, you only have people voting for the extreme left or the extreme right. So these things are living in parallel worlds. So you have desperate people on one side and super wealthy on the other side, and nothing to reconcile anything in the middle. So, and my question about will these people be paid less is a good question, and I don't have the answer, because at some point, if the rest of the middle class is going down, it means that we don't have any backbone anymore. So I think that the purpose of technology in general and AI in specifically should be focused on how do we make sure that we survive as we are today, because it's also the base for being a democratical country. Or regions or whatever. So, and when you look at the same way, there's 30% more autocratic countries in the world than 30 years ago. It's not a good sign. So how can we use this data to empower small countries, empower politicians, empower decision makers, and confront them transparently to the reality so that people get smarter? Because at some point we say, okay, political guys are stupid, but the voters are even more stupid. Okay? So because they elect them. No. So I think that if it's a way to make people smarter on one side and decision makers on the other side, for me that would be the main ethical purpose that we could assign to technology.
I think Denis has really captured the central ethical question of the moment. In the United States, if you were born in the 1940s, you had a 92% chance of doing better than your parents. If you were born in the 1980s, that was at best even odds. So we see bear out across the industrial world this crisis of economic and social mobility. And to Denis' point, that is deeply destabilizing, both to it's deeply to our modern society, to democratic government. We created at the Burn Glass Institute last year something called the American Opportunity Index, which measures the Fortune 500 based on the progress of their workers. It turns out people can work at the same exact role at two different companies and have entirely different prospects for moving up. we're not thinking enough about questions like that, of what the actions we take, policies that we implement nationally, the policies and practices that are being undertaken by companies, and the policies and practices that govern things like AI, how they are going to impact workers. It is very clear that AI is going to significantly rewrite many people's jobs, if not most people's jobs. And the key question is the extent to which we let people become worth less, or the extent to which we recognize that as a society we owe it to people, we owe it to our citizens to make them worth more.
Which is a good segue into, just because we can automate and embed AI, should we automate and embed AI? And who makes that decision, whether we actually leverage the AI? So I'll give an example. I come from South Africa, and a long time ago they made a decision that they weren't going to automate gas pumps. They were going to continue to hire people to work at the gas pumps because they wanted to maintain the employment for South African youth, which is right now has about 60% unemployment. So how do we decide, just because we should and should we?
There was something interesting, I think it was yesterday, I saw that in California, because 5 to 6 years ago, they were starting thinking about having this specific lane on the highways for trucks with different sensors, so that they can be autonomous, so there won't be any driver from point A to point B, and then suddenly a guy would be showing up going from New York to Los Angeles, and we'd show up at Los Angeles, last toll, go into the truck and deliver and do the last mile. And the impact, the predicted impact was 200,000-300,000 jobs lost for the truck drivers. Maybe don't take me to my word because I don't remember the exact number, sorry. And at some point, the regulators and the California governor decided that he would oppose this stuff. And the unions, of course, were agreed with him, saying, no, we are not prepared to let this go. Again, when you think about a truck driver in the US, I think when he's doing long distance, it's mainly men, they are making something like $120,000 to $150,000 a year. So when you're doing 150 and you're a truck driver, chances that you can bring your kid to a good school and so that they can do better than their parents is quite a good chance. But suddenly, if you lose your job and you get a service job which is paid $25,000 or $30,000 a year, the future of your kids and not only yours is lost. So they opposed this regulation. And yesterday they decided to stop it and say, okay, let's go for it. So the California governor said we should do it now because it's also better security for the drivers and everything. I think the drivers would disagree because they certainly prefer the future of their kids about their own security. That's another debate. And they say, so certainly in the next 5 coming years, we'll see these people losing their jobs. No preparations, no upskilling, no reskilling, no nothing. They just lose their job. They lose their hope. Guess what? Who they will be voting for in 1 year. So it's very important to think about it. So at some point you have to make a very difficult decision: security, environment on one side, job, future, and political on the other one. I would not like to be the one making the decision because there's no right and wrong or good and bad, or it's black and white. You don't know. I don't know what I should do in this situation.
A quick final question that we're going to open up to the audience. Do you think AI will enhance our lives or will it destroy our shared humanity?
You have 2 hours.
We've already established that I'm never short of words, but look, I think maybe the right way to answer that question is to follow on what Denis was just saying. Denis described a choice between jobs on the one side, so kind of the stability or efficiency and productivity on the other side. You say, okay, we're going to save money, or we say we're going to give people their humanity by allowing them to continue to have a job. Having a job with no purpose does not give you humanity, does not give you dignity. We go across, we don't need to go all the way to South Africa to find a jurisdiction that doesn't allow self-service pumps. You can go to New Jersey across the river here and see the same thing. Having a job gives dignity in and of itself at some level. But having a job gives even more dignity when it is about actually unlocking someone's potential initially and giving them the potential to rise over time. So the key question is whether in South Africa, on the one hand, look, there's huge youth unemployment, as you pointed out. Good that we're preserving some jobs. But I wonder if there's a third choice here, and that's of not stability versus efficiency, but stability, efficiency, or mobility. And we get economic immobility when we invest in people. This is when I keep coming back to that point. But I think AI can be a force for tremendous good if we invest in people, if we invest in human endeavor and in making it more valuable.
Yeah, and I would say, going back to my example about lab rats, if we just think about productivity, competitions, better profits, I mean, it would be a nightmare. If really we are able to find a kind of universal definition of what progress would be, and if that definition would be the kind of red line that we do not cross with technology, or we cross on the good side of things, it goes again back to having a purpose. So, but the thing is that I spend a lot of time in Africa. The definition of being happy in Africa, in India, in the US, or in Paris when you live in the Trocadero is not the same. So it's very difficult to find a universal definition about being happy, but at least to have the ability to live a decent life and get a better future for the people that are coming after you. And if it's the usage of technology is not driven by that stuff, it's maybe a little bit idealistic, but I'm French, so I agree. We will certainly fail, because at some point, the thing about very briefly, you all know Schumpeter, because the disruptive revolution. So you break something and then you build something new and everything is okay at the end. So it's a very nice movie like Barbie or whatever you want. But the thing is that before it was working because it was fueled by demography and then by growth. No more young kids, no additional consumers, no growth. If you don't have any growth, Schumpeter doesn't work anymore. So we have to first get people prepared. So how will they be working with this AI tomorrow? We need to train them, skill them, upskill them, prepare them, and it's something that almost nobody is doing right now. And that's point number one. And the second thing would be get prepared mostly, and that's really my concern, because when you think about there's parents in this room, you have kids that maybe are 18, 19, and some of them started their business school or university, say, I'll be an auditor at KPMG. No more jobs available when they go out of school. So we have to revamp also all the education system, the schools, universities. Who is doing that? No one. So the problem is preparation, and if we don't prepare, if we don't have a purpose and a sense of what is the common basic human need in this world, I think that it's certainly not AI that will be solving the problem.
Thank you, Denis. So we're going to open it up for questions.
Usually we are looking for the second question, we already have two. Great.
Yeah, that was a very nice discussion, and it is a very eye-opening and also very scary. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I used to be an IT for 17 years, now an entrepreneur for 8 years. But to the words, so like in New Jersey, right, the government regulated that you cannot do your own gas. You need a human being to put the gas. So can the government regulate and say you can't do it? So what is the entrepreneur going to do? That's one question. Second, so you were the entrepreneur. Now that is, whenever the disruption comes, on one side somebody is losing, but you have, it opens up an opportunity to do something. So what is that you recommend to other entrepreneurs?
But you know, the problem of regulation is a few, let's say, centuries ago, or maybe 100 years, you could live into your own world, and the interaction with the rest of the world was not so great. So, certainly you could afford to have a different model because you wouldn't be challenged by your neighbors. The thing is that now it's a global competition, so if a regulator said no in France or no in the US, then there's a Chinese one who said, I don't have any regulation, I'll take the market. So that's a very difficult decision to make. And again, there was this saying by the late Senegalese President Léopold Sédar Senghor, he was saying, en français, vous ne pouvez pas retenir le sable entre les doigts. You cannot retain the sand from going through your fingers. Approximate translation, sorry. Cut the filming, please. And so there's nothing you can do about it, and it's a global competition. So if you take a decision, it has to be on a very wide level. So it could be Europe, it could be US plus Europe, because suddenly you can tip the balance. If it's only one country taking a decision, it will be dead the day after. So, but and on the other side, on competition, yeah, that's I mean, as long as somebody will die, somebody will take over and do something better. The question will be, will he be able to create as many jobs as the one who disappeared? Because that's really the question now, even if it's corrected by the demography. And still, about demography, it means that we are an aging population. So age and innovation doesn't go very well together most of the time. So we are about to discover a new world where a huge technological wave is coming, and at the same time, a big conservative aging populations that want to resist to this technology. So I don't know how it will be playing out. I hope I'm young enough to discover. I would love to be able to influence it in any kind of way. I don't, unless somebody decides that I become the next president of the European Union. Never happened. An entrepreneur, no. But no, I don't know. But that would be mainly my concern. Yeah.
The question is, what are we regulating? Are we regulating the jobs, or are we regulating what happens to people? We say, okay, look, we're going to protect the jobs and make it illegal to fire somebody who has. That kind of lack of flexibility has generally not promoted prosperity, has generally not promoted growth. Or do we say, okay, if you're going to use AI to automate away a job, is there ultimately, whether it be some sort of tax or the like that you pay to support the training of those workers? Alternatively, we could flip this regulatorily and make it a positive thing, and instead of having a value-added tax, you have a value-added tax credit where you say, okay, you get a credit for training somebody equal to how much more wage they're making because of the training. There's a lot of things we can do, but I would encourage encourage us to think about regulatory regimes that are much more oriented toward protecting people and protecting jobs.
I'm Amelia, a mother and entrepreneur. It's a little long-winded, I wrote it down. What's the ethical responsibility of countries when it comes to automation? And can we argue that marginalized countries who aren't having these conversations in many ways are being stifled? If so, how can the global community yield towards global equity? If global equity is the goal, shouldn't automation be spearheaded in those regions? What's your viewpoint, or can we argue that the absence of automation can be viewed as a superior measure of intellect?
Again, we have 2 hours. Thank you for
I mean, what I would say is this, right? I think it's very hard for us to control where automation happens or who's driving these processes. I mean, to some extent, the question we were asking before about, should we do this at all? The toothpaste is out of that tube, and it's hard for us to we can't put it back in. It's hard for us to say who gets to develop it or doesn't. But I think the real question that we should ask is this, and Denis talked before about kind of the power that comes with growth. Growth and youth in the world economy right now is the global south, not the global north. And so I actually think that as we look toward the future of where, who's going to benefit the most, drive the most, I think there's long term, not 5 years, not 10 years, but decades from now, I think we will see a shift in balance of power, and it will be toward countries that have that kind of growth, because it has been a tremendous wellspring of prosperity.
Yeah, the thing is that I'm the chairman of SOSL, which is one of the largest NGO that we have in Africa. And so we have been here for almost 50 years. And not specifically about AI, but about technology. I think we could be doing 100 times what we are doing compared with not using technologies. And you're not living from the same place. So when you have a continent like Africa, where more than 50% of the people are under 25 and undereducated because they don't have access to schools and universities, of course there's a lot of things that would be automated in Europe or in the US that you don't want to automate now because they need that job, at least for a period of time until we can provide them with an access to education and all that stuff. But the impact of technologies on emerging countries could be huge. The only problem that we have here is also the political structure and the guys who are running countries like Africa. When it stays between us, but I love Ivory Coast. I spend a lot of time here. I kind of like Ouattara, but his wife is so greedy that she's taking away so much money. You say you could build hospitals, schools, whatever, it's by billions, right? So at some point, it's not only the thing that technology is available, it's also that political guys don't reap most of the benefits that should go to their people to invest in their future. And so officially, most of the ministers in these different countries are paid, $1,500 a month. They have apartments in New York, okay. So, but it's not only in Africa, of course. But because I know Africa better, yeah.
I mean, in America, we have 2 healthcare systems. We have a very elite healthcare system for those who can pay. And actually, AI is going to have the most impact immediately on healthcare. They're going to be extraordinary breakthroughs, but just because they're those extraordinary breakthroughs, it may only be accessible to those who can afford those breakthroughs, not to Africans, not to other people. Right? And so that is the fear, that we create this 2-tier system with these extraordinary breakthroughs.
So you have to use the technology, taking into consideration where the countries and the economies are, and the structure. We are aging, Africa is young, so it's 2 different things, but the good thing about this stuff is that technology could do so many things. I mean, again, for SOSL, it's a huge thing that we could do, because at the end of the day, mostly women, because we are financing 90% of the people we finance are women. What they could do with technology would be tenfold, 20-fold. It's completely crazy. And plus, instead of selling what they are producing for 10 or 20% of their value on the market and leave the traders to take most of the profits, they could keep in their pocket 70% of the profits. Doing a blockchain platforms to trade over cereals or whatever you think about. It's crazy what we could do with technology. So the thing is that, why don't we invest that? I don't want to go into very complicated matters, but when I think about what we could do with the billions that we are spending on the Ukraine war, we can change the face of Africa with this money, all right? So, again, it's complicated decisions to make, and I'm not making it, but just commenting, so it's very easy. But when you think about billions to buy missiles to kill people on one side and to bring a future to 1.5 billion population, I don't know. I would have to think about it.
So, this is a question for Matt. You mentioned investing in people as key to a good humane outcome, but that can be challenging because jobs constantly change and the skills needed to perform those jobs change with them. And so how can companies and individuals think about where and how to invest in people?
So first of all, I just want to underscore the point that you just made about just the extent of dynamism that is involved in rewriting jobs. We undertook a study last year together, before generative AI swarmed onto the scene, together with the Boston Consulting Group. We found that the average US job has seen 37% of its top skills replaced just in the last 5 years. So when you say, hey, look, jobs can change, jobs change all the time, it's absolutely. It was the case before generative AI, and generative AI we can expect to accelerate that dynamism. The key then is being able to, number one, be able to be somewhat more predictive. Predictive is very hard. We like to use terms like predictive, especially in the world of AI. But being able to really understand exactly what's going to change at the leading edge of the market, you can mine patents and things like that, but it doesn't work all that well. But we can develop better antennae to see those changes happening in more real time. And so, real-time data sets are allowing us to actually see the bellwethers of change within jobs. The good news is you don't actually need to, most changes don't happen all at once. They take sometimes a couple of years, sometimes a few years. So if we can see those changes happening in real time, we can anticipate them, we can respond to them. That gets the second part of this, which is about making sure that we have a much more responsive infrastructure for adapting. Right? So we can't, jobs will change, they will continue to change. That's why I talked before about the very impressive step that France has made, investing in lifelong learning infrastructure that Singapore has made, and giving every Singaporean a lifelong learning account. We need those kinds of infrastructures because the once and done model of educating people, okay, you go to school, you go to university, you're done, you go into the workforce, and we assume that you'll more or less be able to be stable, doesn't work in a world where 37% of the job, the skills of the job change in 5 years. Everyone needs to be able to acquire new skills on the fly. In the US, we have a natural infrastructure for this, which is America's community college system, but it is scandalously misdirected right now to what we call transfer degrees, which are oriented toward people starting and then eventually you'll finish your university degree, as opposed to orienting around what that infrastructure is really needed for, which is helping people acquire skills in the fly.
Just to follow up, and I think the main purpose of those conferences that I mentioned before is to compare what is happening in Europe, France on the one hand, and America and the States on the other one. You both indicated that in order to succeed in AI, you need deep markets, financial brains, and there are very good universities on both sides of the Atlantic. It would seem to me that one ingredient that is missing in Europe compared to the States is the acceptance of risk. Because when you want to develop a project of AI, I speak mostly about fintech, which I'm more familiar. Basically, you have one chance out of 5 or 6 that it's going to go through. In order to create a team, top-notch people to develop a project, if you are an honest project manager, you will have to tell you, dear Mr. X or dear Mrs. Y, we reviewed your resume, we think you are very well qualified, we would like you on our team, but to be very honest with you, there is an 80% probability that we will not be able to keep you in this company 1 or 2 years from now. And this is something which is more or less accepted in the United States, and unfortunately, in spite of all the positive policies, training programs, and so on, it's still something we're not willing to consider in Europe.
So I have said many incorrectly political things so far, so I hope Jeremy doesn't hate me too much. But you know, there's definitely when you have spent, I was born in France, I've been in the US several times, and now I'm a permanent resident here. In France, we started this principe de précaution during the Chirac presidency, which has certainly one of the biggest mistakes that he made. So, because when there's too much precaution, there's no risk, no innovation, no rewards. So that's basically it. And we have a lot of regulation, which is, again, Europe, spending a lot of time regulating everything, mostly by people who don't understand what's the real life, because they have never been working in their life. In the private sector, they don't even know what is a job, what is a profit or financial statement and everything. I remember it was the President François Hollande government, so we created a movement which was called Pigeon, because he wanted to raise the capital gain tax from 32% to 64%. And we did an online fight that we won, and we ended up at the Élysée Palace and then at Bercy, and there was 7 ministers, so Montebourg, Moscovici, it was overpopulated. And one of the first questions that one of the ministers, I won't point any finger, asked me is, Denis, can you explain what a chief financial officer is? I say, you're working as a minister in Bercy, finance minister. So, over-regulation at some point, it's just an act of people who don't trust their people. If you trust them, you can leave a certain margin of flexibility for taking a risk, for living their life, trying things. That's not what we are doing. So, of course, there's a lot of risk, but at some point the US is also in danger, because when I was mentioning the BRICS, at some point the dollar is not staying as the money of reference for all the transactions in the world. Suddenly there won't be anyone to finance the huge amount of debt that the US have today. So I would say that the US is taking more risk. On AI, if you look at the 6 or 8 last months, the amounts invested in AI is just crazy. And I think we invested 500 million in France. So, of course, you exactly know where would be the largest AI-based company in the world. And unfortunately, that won't be in Europe. But we still have a very good education, a lot of very good data scientists. Research and development is great until the moment of it's not, because we are not paid. And they want to be paid more. And now China, they are trying to hire the mathematicians in France. They offer them 10 times what they are making in France to make them come. So that's where we need to invest. Invest in people, invest in training, and reward the best people that we have to make sure that we stay where we are. Because we have a lot of very smart people, specifically in France. Given this, that's why we need to focus again on math, because AI, that's basically mathematics and nothing else. If you want to be a data scientist, you can be very good at reading Robert Dumas or whatever, but that won't be making you a very good data scientist. And so that's what we need today.
It's true we took independence, but Africa still struggling from it. And Guinea is open for anyone who wants to come and do mining. And we do have a king from Angola who visited us also last week with my friend here, who is a professor of finance from Ramapo in New Jersey. I live in the state of New Jersey. I'm here almost 29 years. Africa is open. And when you come and you want to invest, try to connect with the population. Don't stay up with the government. Go down. Try, let the people adopt you. And once the people adopt you, you're not going to lose whatever you come from. And you will stay. It doesn't matter where you're from. We still love France. And we still love anybody who wants to come and invest with us. Thank you.
So cry from the heart, but I love Africa. I spent the third of my life there, so I'm convinced.
One more question?
For either of you, I was just saying, if the human brain was so simple that you could understand it, we would be so simple that we wouldn't. So I guess my question is, to understand the brain, we would have to understand where it came from. And if we asked everyone in that room that question, I think we would get 50 different answers. So I think in terms of just intellect, AI, we still can't understand how short-term memory processes in terms of the complexity of the brain. I think you brought that up earlier. So my question is that gonna stop AI from moving forward? Just any neuroscientist would say, do you understand the brain is the question. So I just wanted to leave you with that. I know it's a long answer.
As a neurosurgeon.
Sorry.
Because do you want to do it? Because Matt has a train to catch, so I don't want to be late to have. No. Oh yeah. So very quickly, you know, Yuval Harari very recently said that if we were losing the language, thanks or because of AI, we would lose humanity. I think that, modestly, but I think he's right and wrong. I think for me the problem is memory, not language. Because everything on the brain is based on memory. And conscious or unconscious memory. And what you call intuition is just the aggregation of things that you don't even know that are here in your brain and that you reuse in a mysterious way to do what you call a gut feeling or intuition or anything. So the problem of kind of leaving the technology and leaving our memory to the technology and just analyze the process of it is really a big danger for humanity. So that's certainly a thing that we should watch. But really reinventing the complexity of the human body and brain is just at this stage completely impossible. So that's why AI is doing it in a different way. But for me, memory is definitely the most worrisome part of it. When I look at young kids and the way the last 10 years memory attention rate has been going down, for me it's a really big challenge.
Yeah. Memory is replicable. Pattern analysis is replicable. Beauty is not. And I think more that we start to actually think about what makes people unique, what makes people's work unique is that appreciation of beauty, the more that we can stay at.
I worked for Singularity University, and there were a lot of people there that believed in the cult of technology and that we are just human machines and that we're just biological algorithms. And I think there are a lot of, and I don't agree with that statement, I will go on record, but I think there are a lot of people that don't appreciate beauty, and we're treating our earth in a very negative way right now because we don't respect the beauty that is nature. So I'm going to close the panel on that note. And thank you.
Pardon? Je dois y aller. Je vais aller aux toilettes.